Lena Moretti walked out on her husband with nothing but a suitcase, leaving behind 7 years of marriage and a life that had crushed her dreams. At 32, she was starting over, staring at a stranger in the train window, a woman with hollow eyes and a heart heavier than the bag on her shoulder. The train station buzzed with life. Families laughing, couples holding hands, travelers rushing to their platforms. Lena sat alone on a wooden bench, her suitcase at her feet, the only thing she'd taken from a house that never felt like home. "Platform 4, the speaker crackled, announcing her train to a small town she hadn't seen in years, her mother Bernice's house where she'd grown up. She adjusted the suitcase strap, its weight pulling her down, but it was nothing compared to the burden of her past. 7 years of marriage to Paul had left her a shadow of herself. His voice echoed in her head. "You're just a dreamer, Lena. You can't handle the real world." She'd believed him for too long, letting his words silence her stories, her poems, her voice. In the beginning, she thought she was in love, or maybe she just wanted to believe she was. Paul had that charm, the kind that makes you feel seen, wanted, until you weren't. It started slow, like a whisper. He'd smile and say things like, "Maybe don't wear that, it's not very flattering," or "That's not real writing, Lena, be serious." Little jabs disguised as concern. But over time, those jabs dug deeper, until her reflection became something unfamiliar. She gave up writing, then stopped laughing, then stopped speaking up at all. Their house was beautiful on the outside, with perfect hedges and white curtains, but inside it felt cold, controlled. Her ideas were too messy, her dreams too big. Paul liked everything tidy, predictable, silent. She became that silence just to keep the peace, just to survive. The last straw wasn't a fight. It wasn't shouting or slamming doors. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet as usual. She found one of her old poems tucked in the back of a drawer, a scrap she thought she'd thrown away. Reading it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, herself. Not Paul's wife, not the woman who always apologized, just Lena. And that feeling scared her, but it also lit a match. That night, she packed the suitcase. 1 coat, 2 books, a pair of boots, and the silver locket her mom gave her at 17. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't sad, she was, but because the sadness had already done its damage. What she felt now was something new, heavy, sharp, but honest. And so here she was, at the station, waiting for a train to the only place that had ever felt like hers. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from everything she was finally letting go of. And just as she closed her eyes trying to catch her breath, a voice behind her said her name. Quiet, careful. "Lena?" Paul's control had been subtle but relentless. "You talk too loud," he'd say, "or your writing's a waste of time." Over time, Lena stopped writing, stopped dreaming, stopped being herself. She'd filled notebooks with stories as a girl, their pages bursting with flowers and birds drawn in the margins. Now those notebooks were gone, replaced by a life of quiet obedience. It wasn't one big moment that broke her, it was a slow drip. Every ignored opinion, every sarcastic comment, every smile that didn't reach his eyes. It chipped away at her until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She didn't wear color anymore. Her laugh had turned quiet, cautious. Her eyes always searched the room, looking for his reaction first. That's what control looks like. Not always loud, not always violent. Just steady pressure until you collapse. The final fight had been the breaking point. "I make the decisions for us," Paul had said, his calm tone hiding the chains in his words. It was the way he said, "us," like she was a child, not his wife. Something inside Lena snapped. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. A kind of numb awareness that this man, this life, had taken everything from her. She didn't cry or argue. She just nodded, grabbed the suitcase she'd packed weeks ago, and walked out. He didn't follow. Maybe he thought she'd come crawling back, like always. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, he didn't stop her. He never called, never texted, as if she was a paper cup tossed out the window. At the station, Lena felt like a blank page. Everyone around her had a purpose, a direction, a life they were heading toward. Meanwhile, she was just sitting there, holding a suitcase packed with memories she wasn't sure she wanted. She didn't know what she expected to feel. Freedom, maybe? Relief? But what she felt most was emptiness. the kind that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sandwich she'd made that morning, just peanut butter and jelly the same way she used to make it in high school. She took a bite, but her hands were shaking. The bread felt dry in her mouth, a piece fell to the ground, and she sighed, ready to let it go. That's when she heard it. "Let me get that," a soft voice said behind her. Not pushy, not fake, just gentle. She turned, startled, and saw a man about her age crouching down to grab the dropped piece. He had messy brown hair and kind eyes behind scratched-up glasses. Something about him felt familiar, like a face from a dream, or a melody you forgot the name of. She blinked, confused for a moment, and he smiled in that way people do when they know you but aren't sure if you remember them. "Lena, right?" he asked. Her name sounded strange in his mouth, like it had meaning again. She searched his face. It took a second, but then it clicked. Theo, her neighbor from 2 houses down. They used to ride bikes together in the summer, read comic books in his treehouse, talk about dreams and planets and everything in between. He'd moved away when they were kids, and she never saw him again. Until now, right here, on a random bench, at a random train station, holding a piece of her sandwich like it mattered. "Theo?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Yeah. I wasn't sure it was you, but I saw the locket. Your mom gave you that, right?" She instinctively touched the silver heart around her neck. She hadn't realized it was showing. Her eyes welled up before she could stop them, not from sadness, but from the strange feeling of being seen. Actually seen. For the first time in years, he sat down beside her like no time had passed, no awkward small talk, just warmth, comfort, familiarity. And for the first time since she walked out that door, Lena didn't feel alone. The sandwich was forgotten, the train announcements blurred in the background. All she could hear was the quiet beat of her own heart, starting to feel again, starting to hope. And in that moment, she didn't know what came next, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to know. Because life had just handed her something she thought she'd lost for good, a second chance. A reminder. A soft voice behind her that said, "You're still here, you're still you, and you're not invisible anymore." "You don't remember me, do you?" the man said, smiling like he didn't mind if she didn't. Lena frowned, scanning his face for clues, feeling the weight of memory stirring. "I'm Sam, Samuel Cooper. We went to Centro Norte High together, Mrs. Patterson's literature class." The name cracked open something in her mind. Sam. The quiet one who always had his head in a book. The one who used to scribble poems in the back row, barely speaking above a whisper. She saw him again in her memory, clear as if it were yesterday, his papers flying across the hallway floor, boys laughing, stepping over his words like they were trash, while he stood there silent, eyes fixed on the linoleum. "Sam," she said slowly, the name unlocking a softer piece of her past. "You were always reading." He laughed, the sound light and warm, with a trace of old shyness still in it. "And you were always writing. You had those notebooks with the birds and flowers drawn in the corners, covered in doodles and dreams." Lena's chest tightened. Those notebooks had been a lifeline, her secret place, a home, before home stopped feeling safe. "That was a long time ago," she said, voice caught between pride and sorrow. Sam sat beside her, leaving just enough space to not feel overwhelming. "Not that long," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. What he pulled out looked small and ordinary, a yellow pencil, worn down and taped at the top. But when he turned it toward her, her breath caught. On the side, faint but still visible, were her teenage words etched in crooked handwriting. "The best stories begin with courage." "You gave me this," he said gently, "after those jerks ripped up my poems in the hallway. You helped me pick up the pieces, gave me this pencil, said it was your lucky one. You told me to keep writing." Lena stared, stunned. She had no memory of giving it to him, but she could see herself doing it. She remembered how angry she felt watching those boys crush something so fragile. She remembered wanting to protect that spark in someone else, even when hers was already flickering. Sam smiled. "You said words have power. I believed you. I still do." He unzipped his bag and handed her a book. The cover read, "Paper Constellations by Samuel Cooper." Her fingers shook as she took it, flipping through the pages until she found the dedication. Her breath hitched when she read it. "For LM, who gave me my first writer's pencil and the words I carry to this day." LM, she whispered. Lena Moretti. That's my maiden name. Sam nodded. I tried to find you a couple times, but you disappeared. Then I saw your name changed to Lena Harrington. Her face hardened just slightly. No, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Lena Moretti? I'm going back to who I was. I'm done with Harrington. She told him everything. Not every little detail, but enough. That she'd walked away from her marriage, that she was heading back to her mother's, that she didn't know what was next, just that she couldn't stay where she was. Sam didn't flinch or ask for more. He just listened. Really listened. Sometimes you gotta go back to start over, he said. The train announcement came on, her platform blinking on the board. Sam stood with her, then pulled the pencil back from his coat pocket and held it out. You might need this now. Lena smiled, touched but sure. No, she said softly. You keep it, it's done you good. He smiled wider, then pulled out a different gift. A leather-bound notebook. Soft, warm brown with a ribbon marker. Then take this, he said, for when you're ready to write again. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over it like it might burn her. How do you know I stopped? She asked. Sam's eyes softened. Your stories in the school magazine. They were different. Real. You wouldn't stop unless something made you... She took the notebook, holding it like it was breakable and sacred all at once. The train beeped. Her train. Her new beginning. She picked up her suitcase, heart thudding. Can I call you? Sam asked, not desperate, just hopeful. Just to know you got there safe? Lena reached into her purse, tore a scrap from an old receipt and wrote down her mother's number. It was the first time she'd given out anything with no one watching over her shoulder. Her first real act of freedom. She handed it to him. Thank you, she said simply, for remembering me. Sam took the paper like it was something important, not just numbers. Have a good trip, Lena Moretti, he said, and when he said her name, it didn't sound like a label or a memory. It sounded like a promise. Bernice's house smelled of cinnamon and coffee, just like it always had. Nothing fancy, but it wrapped around Lena like a soft blanket. The yellow walls were a little faded now, the floral curtains hung slightly crooked, and the clock in the hallway still ticked 5 minutes too slow. But it was home. My daughter, Bernice whispered, pulling her close, her arms stronger than Lena remembered. That night, curled up in her old twin bed, Lena opened the notebook Sam had given her. Its pages were clean, untouched, full of quiet challenge and endless promise. She stared at them for a long while, then uncapped a pen and wrote the first words that came to her. Today I left with just a suitcase. The ink looked fragile at first, but then her hand kept moving. Her thoughts spilled out in waves. One sentence, then another. Stories about who she was and what she'd lost. Pieces of herself that she thought had vanished forever. She wrote until her hand cramped and her eyes blurred with exhaustion. That night, with the notebook still open on her pillow, she fell asleep dreaming of trains and pencils and fresh starts. The next day her phone rang. Just checking you got there okay, Sam said. His voice was steady, a little nervous but kind. They talked for 2 hours straight, about books and memories, about nothing and everything. He told her he was now teaching literature at a local college and that his mom's nursing home was just down the road from the station. Finding you there felt like fate, he admitted. From then on, their calls became a routine, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sam started sending her books, poetry, novels, even his own drafts. Lena read them all. Something inside her had been asleep for years, but now it stirred, stretching out, remembering what it felt like to care again. Her notebook filled up quickly. Then another. She started sending stories to magazines. Most came back with polite rejections, but a few didn't. She framed her first acceptance letter, not for anyone else, but to remind herself that she had something to say. One afternoon, the phone rang again, but it wasn't Sam, it was Paul. His voice cracked like old wood. "You'll come back," he said, almost like a threat. "You always do." Lena paused, letting the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Not this time," she replied, her voice calm and certain, and when she hung up, her hands didn't shake. She didn't cry. She felt free. A year passed. Sam invited her out for coffee one Sunday. He looked different, older, sure, but there was still a boyish softness in his eyes. "The university needs someone to teach creative writing," he he said casually, sipping his drink. I told them about you. Lena blinked. Me? I'm barely a writer again. Sam smiled like he knew better. I've read your work. Lena, it's real, it's honest. You've lived through something and come out the other side. You know what it's like to lose your voice and claw it back. That matters. People need that. She didn't give an answer that day, but the idea settled into her mind like a seed. Within a month, she took the job. The first workshop was small, 4 students, one squeaky whiteboard, and nerves she hadn't felt since high school. But it grew. Word spread. Lena found herself loving the way students lit up when they finally unlocked a line that said what they felt. She started building a curriculum, staying late to help someone through a stubborn waking up excited again. One rainy evening, Sam invited her over for dinner. His apartment was a reflection of him, books on every shelf, notes tucked into mugs, art made by students pinned to the fridge. On a table by the window stood a glass case. Inside was the yellow pencil. It's my beginning, he said, brushing dust off the glass. They ate on the couch, laughing over old school stories. Later, she told him more. About Paul, about how she used to believe her dreams were childish, selfish, impossible. Her voice cracked. The pain still lived in some of those words. But she said them anyway. And Sam didn't interrupt or try to fix it. He just listened, really listened, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he reached out and held her hand. No pressure, no promise, just presence. That was the moment something shifted for good. Because for the first time in years, Lena wasn't explaining herself. She wasn't shrinking to fit inside someone else's life. She was just there. Fully, and someone saw her messy, strong, healing, and stayed. 2 years later, Lena stood in the middle of a crowded bookstore, holding a microphone with both hands and trying not to cry. The cover of her first published book, The Suitcase, beamed up at her from every table, bold title, soft watercolor art, her name printed in clean, confident font. The place was packed with people who had become part of her story. Her students, who once thought they had nothing to say, her mom beaming in the front row with a tissue clutched tight, and Sam standing a few feet away, his arms crossed and eyes shining with quiet pride. When the event was over, after all the books were signed and the chairs were being stacked, Sam pulled her aside and handed her a small white box. Not a ring, he said quickly, teasing, remembering the conversation they'd had about not needing papers or promises to define something real. Inside the box was a silver chain with a small heart-shaped pendant, simple and warm. Just something to wear on the days you forget how strong you are, he said. Lena blinked fast, swallowing down a lump in her throat. That night, she wore the necklace to bed. 4 years passed. Their daughter, Sophia, turned 3, with wild curls and endless energy. One morning, Lena found her curled up on the floor of the garden with Sam, both of them hunched over a notepad. Sophia held a tiny yellow pencil so worn it was barely more than a nub and scribbled across the page with great effort. "I'm writing a story, Mommy," she said proudly, not looking up. "A princess saves a prince with a magic pencil." Lena knelt beside her and watched, her heart swelling at the sight. She looked at Sophia's determined little face, then over at Sam, whose hands were smudged with dirt and marker, his smile peaceful. That stub of pencil had traveled through so much heartbreak, so much healing, and now it was in the hands of a little girl who didn't yet know the full weight of what it had meant. And maybe that was the beauty of it, how something once broken could still create something whole. Lena's life wasn't perfect. She still had days when doubt crept in, when the pages didn't fill the way they used to, when memories tried to haunt her in the quiet. But now, those moments didn't scare her. They reminded her she was still moving, still writing, still choosing her own story. Teaching gave her purpose. Writing gave her voice. Loving Sam gave her peace. And Sophia gave her something she didn't know she needed: joy, chaos, laughter, and little hands that pulled her into the present. That afternoon, Lena sat under the garden tree and reread the first story she ever wrote after leaving Paul. The ink had faded slightly, but the words still carried weight. She smiled and tucked it away into a folder filled with rejections, acceptances, lesson plans, and first draft. It was all part of the same journey. She glanced at the pencil on the table, now barely more than a memory, but it had done its job. It had sparked something that grew into everything. That tiny, battered pencil had reminded her that courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it looked like walking out with just a suitcase. And sometimes it showed up again in the hands of a little girl who believed magic could be written down. Lena didn't need to dream anymore. She was already living the story.